Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining today's A&M Pathways webinar, Securing the Future, Simplifying Cybersecurity with Platforms. My name's Amanda Deshuk. At the end of today's session, I'll be sharing the details on our next webinar with Matt Good and David Abbott, Navigating the Future with VMware Cloud Foundation 9.0. Before we dive in, I'd like to start a couple housekeeping items. Today's webinar is being recorded. We'll send you the link after the session so you can rewatch the content or share it with your colleagues. We encourage your questions and comments throughout the webinar. Please use the Q&A box on your screen. I'll be monitoring it to either bring your questions to our speakers as we go and hold it for the QA portion for the end. Now I'd like to introduce today's presenters, Robert Ochoa, Director of Cybersecurity Sales at A&M, and Lou Norman, a seasoned multi-domain architect for security at Cisco. Robert, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Amanda. Appreciate it, and appreciate all the logistics and getting us together today. Good afternoon, folks, and thank you for joining us today. Like Amanda said, my name is Robert Ochoa, and I'm the Director of Cybersecurity here at A&M. I'm a U.S. Army veteran, and I've been passionate about the cybersecurity industry for over 35 years at this point in my career. Cybersecurity is definitely the topic of choice for me and has been for a long time. I've spent a lot of time in cyber. I've had engineering roles, sales roles, cybersecurity executive leadership jobs, and most importantly, I've seen so many cyber market transitions over the decades. And today, I am very excited to hit on a few of those current market transitions that our colleagues, cyber practitioners and cyber leaders, are forced to deal with and forced to reconcile in today's environment. So we'll be talking about cybersecurity platforms and how the hybrid mesh firewall market is or has redefined security and security architecture across our customer environments. I am very excited to have Mr. Lou Norman, multi-domain architect with Cisco for security, with us today. Good afternoon, Lou. How are you?
I'm well, Robert. Thank you very much. I'm excited to be here too. I've been at Cisco now for over 30 years. Prior to that, I worked at the University of Arizona. I've been doing networking, that entire time. And, as networking and security have evolved, I've pretty much evolved along with it. Some of the market transitions that Robert was talking about. I remember the days when we didn't have any security on our network. So we've been coming down a long path here from a security perspective in the IT world. And it certainly got more exciting over the last few years. And I'm also a veteran from the United States Coast Guard.
Well, thanks, Lou. We appreciate your service. Coast Guard's been doing some great things on our coastlines, especially these last few interesting years. Well, thank you. We're very excited to have you with us this afternoon. So I'm going to jump in, Lou. As a cybersecurity leader, you've seen the field evolve from siloed tools to integrated platforms. We talked about, decades of being in the industry. Can you share a quick story from your career about a time when, fragmented security led to major headache for the customer, and, maybe how platform-based approach a modern network like today could have changed that outcome?
Yeah, I can, Robert. A couple of things I'll throw out, and this is, kind of in general for the IT industry, right? In networking, if you go back, 3 decades ago in networking was so complicated. I mean, we just didn't have, Ethernet and IP running everything. We had AppleTalk, DECnet, LAT, DLSW, SNA, frame relay, ATM, Sonnet. We had all these different technologies that we don't even think about today. Right? Today, it's virtually all Ethernet and it's virtually all IP, which, does make things a lot easier. Because if I look back at what we were doing back then and trying to do that, with the tools that we have now, it would have been so much easier. Right? And the same thing kind of goes for, for security as well. Right? Security, used to be a few products. Right? If you go back even 20 years ago, most customers had 3 or 4 security products. Today, They have 20, 30, maybe 50 or more IT security products, right? There's gotten to be a huge, let's go fix each and every problem with a different product, right? And so it's not just a firewall, it's not just, some email security, those kinds of things. Now we have lots of different intricacies out there, lots of different information coming from all those different security products, and really trying to understand where we actually have to go configure policy, where we have to go look at logs. All of this gets to be, very cumbersome. And on top of that, a lot of these different products are run by different groups, at a particular customer. So, really bringing all this back to, how do we, provide more security, meet the constant threats, the constant policy changes, all of the things come about, and a platform is a way to get there.
Yeah, that simplicity certainly is the shift today. Complexity continues to be the killer, and I think you'll hear us talk a lot about that today. So, just a quick follow-on question from that, Lou. Again, based on a long career in cyber, what was one of, if not the aha moments that sort of shifted your thinking towards simplification? Can you think of a single event or an example of one of those?
Yeah, I can. I mean, when we were looking at, more than a decade ago, there was no products out there that really brought multiple security functions together. Hardly even, amongst different, vendor products, but inter-vendor with, vendor A and vendor B, we just didn't have it. And it was the identity service engine, right? So when the identity service engine came along and had PX Grid and allowed us to exchange security contextual information from endpoints and users across multiple different platforms, Cisco platforms, and a lot more non-Cisco platforms. I mean, today, I think there's over 200 vendors today that, can ingest PX Grid feeds and basically do something with that, or share information with PX Grid so some other product can do something. And a lot of this is not from Cisco to a product, to a product vendor. It's from a product vendor to another product vendor, and Cisco is just the gateway to go do that. And so, really that was, the beginning of when we need to have something to, take security information and share it amongst multiple vendors.
Yeah, that's a good one. I actually remember that the onset of what platform exchange grid, PX Grid, and it was this hybrid, and I suppose still is, of a programmatic approach to an ecosystem with partners, as well as like this common set of APIs that can exchange all this information. Very revolutionary. Really good answer. I think that was a pivotal time in history for platforms starting to become very prolific. So Lou, for our audience, we have IT professionals, security professionals. I'll ask you, maybe a little bit of a loaded question, because there's a lot of myths out there. But what's one myth about cybersecurity platforms that you hear most often, and why do you think it holds teams back from adopting?
So the biggest myth that I see and hear from my customers is that a platform is going to lock you into a single vendor, and that you're going to have that vendor's products and only have those capabilities within that vendor's product. And that's not a platform at all. These platforms need to be open. They need to integrate with other security vendors. They need to have the capabilities to actually share information both directions. These integrations need to be supported, right? It's not just one, company's, okay, I have a platform, I built this interface, you other vendor need to, conform to everything I do, and you need to support whatever I want. And those kinds of things just won't happen unless you actually have the vendors talking to each other, working things out. So, when you have these integrations built, it actually are functional and actually can get information back to you. No one single vendor out there makes all of the security products. And that's why your platform has to be open. It has to have these integrations with other vendors. Otherwise, it will never be successful. And so, so you really, from my standpoint, it's not a single vendor lock-in as long as that platform has the capabilities to integrate multiple vendors.
Yeah, I appreciate that answer. Having both of us been in the industry so long, it doesn't seem that long ago, from Cisco's EIGRP proprietary days to now looking at every security product as an open platform to the point where, you folks are even going out negotiating SLAs with competitors for integrated, experiences with customers. So I think that was a very astute observation and myth. I think people do feel like it can tend to lock them in. So Lou, let's kick it off with our first big takeaway, which is why, the why platforms, the power of unified platforms. I feel like it's changing the way we're looking at cybersecurity, right? Because it kind of cuts through the chaos. So every OEM and their brother, and I mean this respectfully, but this is just the truth, right? Is every OEM out there with more than one security product all of a sudden has a platform, right? They bring together their 2.5 products or their 6 products, whatever, and they build a platform because they see that the industry is making that shift and people are consuming platforms. They're taking a look at simplification. So I think my question to you, Lou, is what does the unified platform really mean in practice? And how does it solve the pain of managing, you talked about 20, 30, 50 discontiguous tools inside of an environment?
Sure. And you're absolutely right, Robert. Having a bunch of different security products, and why some of them may be similar, have some similar function, is not a platform. A platform has to be about the integration of capabilities, and they can solve, complexity issues across different facets of your operations of security, right? This isn't about one product or another. This is about making all the products better. And whether it's in configuration, policy management, visibility, on campus, in the cloud, out by the pool at someone's house, whatever it may be, right? You have to bringing all these different facets together and use them, in conjunction with other products to actually provide the security you're looking for. These integrations need to be easily configured. Going out and creating, taking an API and writing a bunch of scripts to use these APIs back and forth. This is not what I'm talking about integrations. I'm talking about having built-in integrations where you pretty much go, do the authentication piece of it and then be able to actually, start sharing information, whether it's configuration, whether it's policy, whether it's logs, all of those kinds of things need to just start to happen. And really actually make sure that everybody is part of this program and not just 2 ships in the night passing each other. I also want to talk about what this isn't about, right? This isn't about a single tool that does everything, a single pane of glass. Our friend John Rice, used to say a single pane of glass is a single pane in the, you can finish that statement, right? Because, we're bringing different capabilities together. There's going to be a lot of different interfaces out there that, need to be unique. I mean, how you actually go and configure ICE versus how you go configure a firewall is a lot of different things going on there. So, it's going to be different. And some of these products, are going to have their niche of what they have to do and their part of it, which some of it may be shared with other products. Other parts of it is very unique to that actual solution, and it will have a unique interface to configure those things. You just need to bring these capabilities together to make places or policy configurations for stuff that has to be changed frequently, or it's not so much how often it has to be changed, but you have to make this change across multiple different platforms. I want to block a URL across all these platforms. I want to block an IP address or a file hash. You have to actually make sure that you can actually make all that happen quickly and easily from that standpoint.
Yeah, that's a good point, Lou. I'm not surprised you said that, but I didn't exactly expect you to say that. It's not about a single tool that does everything, right? It's about, a single pane of glass or a single set of management criteria that integrates all these tool sets together to give you the kind of efficacy. And I feel like that's where people get frustrated and they go wrong is they feel like, well, I just bought this platform and they look at it like a single tool that is sort of God threaded. But it does take that interesting perspective. So I really like the way you put that. Let me come over the top of that and ask you an additional question there. Can you walk us through a real world example? Maybe it's integrating endpoint security and network security, on how these platforms are working.
Absolutely, Robert. Endpoint and network security is a perfect example, actually. First, let's just look at it from a management domain. The network team manages the network. The desktop team manages the endpoints, right? So obviously these two different groups have different purposes, different customers, how they actually go about their day-to-day business is much different from that standpoint. Identifying and posture assessment for endpoints is going to be key for any zero trust, type of environment, which is the standard that everybody's heading for. But it also requires authentication, and the network needs to do this authentication and have the capabilities to do authentication, but it also needs to talk to the PCs, right? Which, will require some type of software on that endpoint that's actually logging on and having posture assessment done to it. It's going to take a piece of software to do that. That's definitely in the desktop prime, right? And then it's probably, for standardization, when it comes to zero trust, you have to start setting some standards. You're probably going to want some type of an MDM in there as well, right? So these are all, different parts, right? And it's not obvious, but trust me, been down this path with many customers. Having a set of standards to apply hardware, software, and patches on an endpoint is a very key thing to success for zero trust. It requires some standardizations because you can't be checking 5 different operating systems, 3 or 4 different, software of this, 14 different versions of endpoint protection, 5 different browsers, all of these kinds of things, right? That all kind of falls onto the desktop team. But at the same time, if the network team has to build out tools, which it probably actually can't build out a tool that would check that many different things, these two different groups are going to have to work together, in this platform environment from that standpoint. So how do all those systems talk to each other? How do you notify and track compliance? How do you troubleshoot it when someone doesn't get onto the network? How do you know where people need to go on the network? All of this needs to be brought together. And another point about platforms. Platforms go beyond the typical buying centers of an organization. Platforms can span the network team, the desktop team, application, data center, cloud platform, and don't forget the SOC, right? The SOC is going to be part of this as well. These are all different buying centers at a lot of customers. And they have different opinions and priorities about what they need to do and what their purpose is. And sometimes these actually might conflict. I'll always go back to, the job of the network is to pass packets. The job of the firewall is to stop the flow of packets, right? So actually how, how you actually go about, what you allow on the network, what you disallow, all of that has to be agreed by all the parties involved. And I haven't even talked about, okay, so how are we going to integrate multiple of these solutions together? Well, in this particular example, ICE is key to it. I don't know anybody that's really implemented a complete end-to-end zero trust platform without doing something, very similar to ICE and its capabilities to integrate network IoT devices, random things together and put that into a single package. So.
Yeah, very good points, Lou. Thank you. Identity on the latter point, identity is certainly key. So,
Oh yeah.
Building on that, I feel like there's a lot of folks out there, a lot of teams out there that are scared of platforms, right? They fear that consolidation might mean losing control or losing customizations, more like it than control, but losing the control of being able to customize their environment. How do you think, our mutual customers and organizations, can migrate to a unifying platform without disrupting their operations, without the fear of losing their customizations? I mean, where do they start when they have that mindset?
Well, so, migrating security solutions has always had its challenges, right? There's no doubt about that. And since there are very few standards in the security industry, how things are configured, how they're integrated, other products like that need to be considered, right? It's not something we're going to completely gloss over. First, to start with, what are their priorities? To reduce risk, understanding where their biggest challenges are. Some challenges require a platform approach. I mean, zero trust, I just brought up, it requires a platform to do zero trust. You're not going to do it with an endpoint product. You're not going to do it just from the network perspective. There's a lot of different things you need to bring together to make a zero trust platform work. So you're going to have that. To address your, about where you start, I mean, really, this ends up being about priorities, right? What's your priority? Where are your biggest risks? Where do you see, you can effectively, make some changes in that. And part of it actually boils down to, contracts. You have contracts, existing contracts for some of your products. So you're not going to change off of those first. You might change off some other products that need to be upgraded or something along those lines to get end of life. There's lots of different places to start, but it's really, starts with, things like policy. Where do you want to go? I mean, to know where you start, you have to know where you're headed. So, having all those parts and pieces brought together to sit down and, take a look holistically at your whole operation about, where is the best place to start? Because, I mean, I can give you lots of examples that you may or may not apply to somebody, right? Their network's, all aged out and they need to replace their network. Well, that's probably the place to start, right? But other folks may be, that they're looking at upgrading their SOC, right? And doing a bunch of new functions in their SOC. Well, let's look at the tools they need to start doing that and solve that problem. But when we look at the SOC, we need to actually be looking at everything else about how does this fit into a bigger picture. Point products, can't solve these problems.
Yeah, that's a good point, Lou. And there's certainly a lot of use cases out there, and that's why these types of shifts in architecture, require a lot of planning and a lot of strategy, and making sure that we're definitely capturing all the use cases. Let's jump right into sort of the elephant in the room. Let's talk about money for a minute, right? The costs. I feel like this has been a topic for eons, since the inception of these concepts. I feel like a lot of folks underestimate the costs of what is sometimes called the custom or the best of breed approach versus using a platform, right? We talked about how managing these multi-vendor integrations, even with common APIs and feeds and things like that, can create chaos in telemetry in the SOC. The cost of these solutions can get completely out of control very, very rapidly. I mean, you start with 5, 6, 8, and pretty soon you have 50 security solutions you're paying maintenance on, you're paying renewal costs, you're consuming at a rate that you didn't anticipate consuming. And then you have this shelfware tools that seems to just never get deployed and always seems to be on that consolidation docket, tools rationalization docket. This one thing keeps coming up. So there's a lot of ways to measure costs. And folks, I don't think we're not going to break all this down in a quick 45-minute session for you today. But when you look at annual OpEx, CapEx, ROI, TCO, all relevant costs that are associated with, all relative to the costs, that is, that are associated with risk. But one thing is often overlooked, and I think that is the efficiencies in being able to operationalize the security tech stack when you need it on your timeline. So, the decision to move to platforms, in my personal experience over the years, has really helped this on-demand tech stack need. And the other benefit is that it's creating a predictable spending model for the organization, right? Those are my high level thoughts about the money, Lou. Any additional thoughts about the meat and potatoes behind it all?
Yeah, I do. Instead of, say best of breed, how about we, talk about best for your organization or best for integration into your security environment, right? The best of breed is defined by somebody else. And I mean, I've seen different products that are meant for different customers, either larger customers, customers with a big giant SOC, customers with a small SOC, customers with a big staff of folks taking care of their endpoints, other environments where there's nobody taking care of their endpoints, right? All of these, best of breed kind of things typically is going to probably be the most expensive way to do this, right? I mean, obviously they're the best products supposedly from one person's view or another, and they're probably more expensive. Now, I mean, to me, I think the best of integration is a big part of that. The key thing though is this overall security solution needs to be better than a sum of its parts, right? So when you start looking at, intelligently combining a platform capability that can take, multiple different good solutions, provide easier integrations and management options, capabilities to automate response, ways to ensure policy changes are made easily and accurately. This will all lower risk and minimize downtime. Everybody, this is not real rocket science, right? An accurately configured good product will beat a poorly configured best of breed product every time. Deployment of security solutions came up earlier today, and how, this discussion came up earlier today on another call, and how they were struggling to get solutions fully deployed. I mean, when you start thinking, yeah, I've got, 40 or 50 security things. I've got, 10 network things going on. I'm rolling out 5 new applications in the cloud, all of this stuff, right? A lot of competing priorities, right? So getting things fully deployed means doing that the easiest way possible. And really, bringing different parts of your organization together to get solutions implemented quickly. And a platform is just going to help that at every step of the way, right? Adding more different vendors, isn't going to make this easier, right? It's just making sure that, we have all of the right tools, and not just APIs, but, built-in integrations with other vendors, and making this work, solution work end to end quickly and easily is what a platform is really there to do.
Yeah, Lou, it's interesting, but not surprising at all. We both mentioned risk and lowering risk. And so I think that's really the secret sauce in the decision, in the associated costs. The costs have to be in proportion to the risk that you're mitigating, or the perceived risk that you're mitigating in your overall security programs. And I think, that ends up being the case a huge number of times. And
Yeah.
so, I think that's one of the reasons why trending in the industry, a lot of folks are going there. So
Well, I was going to bring up one other thing, Robert, real quick, is if you think one product is going to, make make you more secure, right, and lower risk, think about, we used to talk about in the old days of, in your security plan on one of your products failing, right?
Right.
That's been around for a long time, right? So you have to have this integration capabilities and, things to watch, basically kind of watch other products, right? That, you see a bunch of logs on your firewall of people trying to log into your firewall, and you see a bunch of failures on say your identity, right? You need to bring all of this stuff together to understand that, these things are under attack, and you need to make sure that they're taken care of, right? When you start looking at how do we bring all of these things together, it is the key piece of that to make sure that we can fill those gaps.
It's ironic you said that. That's actually a playbook right out of some of our Purple Team tabletop exercises we do with customers. Is they're like, but we have an EDR. I'm like, that's on fire. Like, that epically failed. Done. You don't have an EDR anymore. Now what?
Right.
I'm like, well, that's not fair. I'm like, but that's the planning, that you should probably be doing
Absolutely.
So let's change it up a bit here and talk about our second big takeaway for the day. We're a little bit more than halfway through today's time. Let's talk about hybrid mesh firewalls, the hybrid mesh firewall market, and how it's already started to change how we look at firewalling and protecting the enterprise. So I'm going to give a quick little bit of context here before we dive into your thoughts, Lou. But what I've noticed about the industry here is that that the analyst world has been signaling, and for some time now, a major shift in how they think about firewalls. So traditional next-gen firewalls have long been the gold standard, but whether it was hybrid work of the past, hybrid work of the future, multi-cloud, the sprawl of multi-cloud, zero trust demands, there's a number of different factors, but Gartner and Forrester, as much as we don't always like to bring them up, they define markets, whether we like this or not, and they're evolving their outlook to reflect this new reality of distributed architectures. So Gartner released the last NGFW NQ, I think December 2022. So since then they've been pivoting hard on hybrid mesh firewall, and I think they originally published that document, the market guidance, I think, or market guide, in early early last year, 2024, that kind of outlined what to expect about mesh-based approaches and securing distributed environments. So this year, Gartner launched the first NQ on hybrid mesh firewalls just a few months ago, August 2025. And they positioned, leaders like Cisco and Palo Alto and Fortinet for the, ability to enforce consistent policies across on-prem, cloud, multi-cloud, remote setups, all those types of things. And similarly, Forrester, their most recent wave for the enterprise firewall solutions, essentially created a benchmark. They dropped that in, the latter part of 2024. And while they haven't actually stood up anything substantial around hybrid mesh firewall, they're increasingly emphasizing these types of architectures in their reports and their analysis, highlighting how platforms deliver superior visibility and efficacy across multi clouds, and really align more with what we see our customers doing today. So the way so this isn't just my definition, folks, but the market definition of these tool sets for hybrid mesh firewall are things like NGFW, firewall as a service, SSE, security services edge, the broader piece of SSE, which is SASE, including SD-WAN, zero trust network architecture, of course, IPS, microseg, and then the big thing, the central policy management. I think hybrid mesh firewall goes well beyond just central policy management, but that's sort of the meat and potatoes of what's bringing all these tools together, like Lou talked a little bit about earlier, about what's important to platforms. So I think that's why this session's so timely today. Lou, I'm going to turn it over to you after my diatribe here on what do you feel like, how's Cisco leading this charge around hybrid mesh firewall?
No, it's a great position, Robert. So, from our standpoint, Cisco's been focused on this path for some time for a lot of reasons, right? Cisco's had firewall capabilities across an array of products for a very long time, right? ASA firewall, it's been around for 20 plus years. Next generation firewall, which includes, FTD, Meraki, multi-cloud defense, remote access, right? So we've had AnyConnect and VPN around forever. Now that's evolved into secure access. Cisco is the leader in SD-WAN, so we've been doing that for some time. ACLs, on firewall switches and routers, right? We've been doing all of that for some time, right? Data center security products, we've been in that game for a long time. And cloud security, as that's been evolving very, very quickly, we've been kind of evolving right along with it, right? So we've had to bring, a lot of these products together, before the hybrid mesh firewall term even existed. Cisco Defense Orchestrator, which is the start and the core of security cloud control, was actually launched in July of 2016. It was 9 years ago that was launched, right? And it was meant, as bringing a policy engine to 3 products, right? So it's basically bringing it to FTD, ASA, and our secure web appliances, right? We're looking at bringing all that together 9 years ago and saw, the capabilities and how it would be, more effective to have a single point to actually start configuring policy, right? So this solution was part of Cisco's, services and cloud-based offerings, and really it was the beginning of that security-centric security architecture that we're talking about here.
Yeah, that's interesting. It certainly is a journey, isn't it? Like none of these things, none of these market transitions happen overnight. They build over long periods of time. So, people are defining hybrid mesh firewall a lot of different ways. I like looking at it when customers ask me, I like looking at it like, you might disagree. This might be a gross simplification of things, but I like looking at it as a firewall fabric is what I tend to call it, right? It protects everything everywhere without the complexity of managing separate tools, right? Because it sort of brings everything together.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're looking at this a little bit differently than that. I mean, from the standpoint of, what we're doing with Hybrid Mesh Firewall isn't individual tools. I mean, we're really managing a common and dynamic security policy across many just Cisco products and non-Cisco products, right? When you start looking specifically, at the Hybrid Mesh Firewall piece of it, there's a very good chance it won't all be one vendor. Right? There's a very good chance you can have multiple vendors there. So you have to be looking at it in that context from that standpoint, right? But putting every configuration option for all of these different products into a single tool is just going to be impossible, right? We obviously can't dictate, features and functionalities to our, nor would we want to, dictate things to our competitors, right? And they're not going to share some of that. So this is really about that policy interchange that we're talking about. Really being able to, take policy from one product to another, which, by the way, Cisco's been doing that for some time as well, too, that we have the capability, we've had the capabilities for some time to pull information from things like Cisco Secure Workload and build out firewall configurations from that. And obviously the dynamicism of PX Grid with ICE allows us to actually basically perform access restrictions on multiple different devices on the fly, as things go along. So, right. So, ensuring that we have a dynamic policy, keep the correct policy on all the different solutions out there really is, the special function of the products we're talking about here, and really providing, security that they're all designed with and make sure they're up to date, those kinds of things.
Yeah, good points. I mean, you made a point that it goes way beyond architecture, way beyond centralized policy management, micro segmentation, even SASE and zero trust. And I think part of that thing that I'm super excited about this continued market transition is distributed firewall. How are you guys looking at that part of the equation, and why is that important?
Yeah, this goes beyond firewalls. Yes, it started there, right? And it's definitely a key enforcement point on your network is going to be your firewalls that you have, right? And existing tools that you have, right? But this also includes things like microsegmentation, the remote access piece of it. How are people going to come into the network? How are they actually going to get onto the network? And what requirements do they have to meet for that, right? So, this network enforcement side of it, you name it, any place, we can enforce policy from, that's what we're going to do, right? Where's the best place to, enforce policy? And you want to have that flexibility to do it, yes, on your firewalls, but you might be doing it some other places, like in secure access. You might be doing it in your application security platform. All of these things are important, right? So we have to make sure that we can actually extend that policy out.
Yeah. Why do you think, sorry, I know it's a direct kind of question here, but why is Cisco's approach so unique there? Because the industry's doing that. I have my own answer to that, but I'd be interested to hear, why is Cisco's approach so unique there?
Well, I mean, our approach to this goes back 9 years ago when CDO was first shipped, right? And it also goes back to PX Grid, which was over a decade ago, right? We've seen that the platform capabilities, is key to, our customer success and making things work and more secure, right? This actually follows on with XDR, right? Which started off with SecureX. Again, SecureX was, integrating other platforms, things that's been around for 5 years, right? This isn't something that, from a Cisco standpoint, we've even changed direction even for, there's been a new term change, hybrid mesh firewall. Cisco hasn't even changed directions. That's the direction we were already going, right? And to show, cross-platform, cross-vendor integration experience is something that our competitors don't have. I mean, they have not been doing this for this long. They don't have, the relationships, the ideas, and how you actually go about partnering with your competitors. All of those kinds of things are something Cisco's been doing for a while. We've been moving all of, and on top of all of this, we've been moving all of our cloud products and many of our on-premise products to a common web framework, right? On the back end, what that means is we can design to standards and be able to share things like objects and share information between different platforms on the back end, which is good for Cisco. But for our customers, having a common look and feel, and I will not say the same, I won't say a single pane of glass, I won't say those kind of terms, but to having some common look and feels to some of these products just makes things easier for our customers. But different products are going to have different levels of complexity and features, number of features, functionality. There's screens and things on one product you'll never need on another one. The best part of our platform, though, is our willingness to integrate to other vendors, and that makes us better. We've been doing it longer. We've got more experience. We have more success stories with our platforms, and we've been integrating more vendors than anyone else in the security product arena. I mean, no one even comes close. Oh, yeah. And one other thing I forgot, we have another small multi-vendor product called Splunk.
That's just a small one. Look, there's definitely no shortage of R&D and innovation around that from Cisco. So I think your points are well taken, right? All those make the solution unique. So Lou, let's start wrapping up here. We've got a few minutes left with the audience. Thanks for bearing with us here, folks. Let me ask you a question as we wrap up, Lou. When we talk about future-proofing the strategies, through platforms, like looking ahead, what trends in platform innovations should our audience watch for over the next 2 or 3 years, to keep them resilient in cybersecurity? Any last parting thoughts on that?
Sure. One that's Cisco based. Oh, sorry. I'm bleeding a little Cisco blue here, which really isn't a thing anymore because all the Cisco products I think are white these days. How'd that happen? We're going to see continued consolidation across the security product landscape. I mean, more players will enter the market, more players will enter the platform market. We're seeing, a lot of this, have some condensing, right? From a Cisco perspective, we plan on keeping on with the platform path. I mean, we've been on this path for more than a decade, and this is the path we're on. We're going to keep going down that. Looking forward, identity is a big challenge, like Zero Trust is. Start working toward them, right? Having real identity across all your platforms and how it can get integrated into a lot of different things. When you look at your individual components, how does this fit into the rest of my security products? Does it automatically feed information into other products? Does it share common policies and other common integrations with other parts of your infrastructure? So beyond the platform piece of it, because you might actually have more than one, platform, you might have some different integrations, some for the SOC, some for the network. But when you start looking, how do we make all this come together, and how does this work as a whole and make the entire organization better?
Thanks, Lou. I appreciate it. We're actually tracking pretty well on time. So folks, thank you so much for tuning in and listening to us go back and forth today. I'd like to turn it back over to Amanda and open it up for any Q&A that you might have for the remaining time.
Yes, so please put your questions in the chat. Thank you, Robert and Lou, for sharing such valuable insights today, and thank you to everyone for joining us. As a quick reminder, this is recorded. We'll be sending out the replay link. Also, I would love your feedback. Take a moment to complete the survey that's going to come out right after this session. Your input helps us bring relevant and impactful content to this series. Finally, I just want to invite you guys to our upcoming webinars in the chat. So you guys can click those links. The registrations are open. And thank you both so much. I'm checking the chat. Everyone says you guys did great. So if there's any other questions, Lou and Robert are on the emails that I sent out today. So feel free to continue the conversation. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, folks.
Thank you, Amanda. Thanks, Robert.
Amanda.